everybody. Thank you for commenting. I see Ruthie is from Seattle. Yeah, we'd love to hear where you guys are from. And also, as we start talking and as we sort of get into the intro and our webinar today, feel free to ask questions, to share, and we'll be monitoring periodically and do our best to address any questions that you guys might have.
Yeah, so excited you all are here with us. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Bojana Jankovic Weatherly. I'm a board-certified internal medicine physician, and I practice integrative and functional medicine as well. And I have the pleasure of knowing the amazing Victoria Albina through mutual colleagues and friends who have a passion for functional medicine as well, and really getting to the root of a lot of the problems that we face today with our health, with our physical and mental well-being. And I've been so inspired, Victoria, as you know, by your posts and your podcast, and so excited to do this with you today.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited for this opportunity. I just adore everything you're doing in the health and wellness space. So hello, everybody. My name is Victoria Albina. I use she, her pronouns, and I live on occupied Lenape territory, also known as New York City. So I am a licensed and board certified nurse practitioner. I've been practicing holistic medicine for many years now. I'm also a life coach, and my passion is working with women to overcome codependency and perfectionism. I also have a podcast. It's called Feminist Wellness, and it's free, and it comes out weekly on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your shows.
Amazing. Wonderful. So it looks like we have people continuing to tune in, but I think we should go ahead and start and do our deep dive. And we thought for everybody listening, we thought we would just start by asking each other how we have been doing during this time and coping during this time. And then we'll sort of expand upon some of the lessons and teachings that we both draw from when it comes to working with our patients and clients. So Victoria, tell us, how have you been doing during this time? I know you have a lot going on professionally as well, and maybe you can share with us kind of on a personal level as well how COVID-19 has changed your current existence and how you're coping with that.
Yeah, thank you. So, like most of us, it's been a very fascinating time. It's been really, the beauty of this time for me has been the gift to look at my daily rituals and how I attend to myself on a daily basis. And one of the things that's been really important to me is giving equal airtime to all of the feelings. So to the anger, at the delays in getting things moving on the federal level, to the anger and fear and worry about our friends and colleagues and many of our listeners' friends and colleagues who are on the front lines as grocery workers, janitors, bus drivers, physicians and nurses, and everyone else who's out there taking care of folks, often without the gear that they need to keep themselves safe. So I've been giving that a lot of time. I actually have been setting aside an hour in the morning that I call Cry It Out.
I love that.
It's been so great, thinking about all the abuelitas in Queens who aren't getting the care they need. And, all the people who are of increased risk for this virus, who are really feeling the worry and the fear and are just having a really challenging time right now, along with everyone who's been laid off or who's unemployed right now and who's really struggling. So I am a tender-hearted, empathetic Leo, and I know that if I don't make the time and space to actively, consciously feel my feelings around these things, they're gonna come out sideways, right? So in those first probably 2 to 3 weeks, I wasn't having this practice. I hadn't sort of thought of it yet. And I realized that my COVID-related worries and fear, everything I just spoke of, it was distracting me, right? It was distracting me from being of service, which is really the thing that's kept me going through this time is, like you mentioned, how can I get on Instagram and share something hopeful or something that makes people think? I've put out 3 extra podcast episodes of the Feminist Wellness podcast to give folks another lens, another way to think about things like uncertainty and control and worry, and to introduce this concept of equal airtime and giving all of the challenging feelings in your life the time and space they really need so that you can process them through your body instead of holding them, right? Because we know, you and I practicing holistic medicine, what you don't feel, you can't heal, right? And trauma stays in the body, stress stays in the body. So I've also been moving a lot. I know you've been running, and I can't wait to
Yes.
hear about that. Yeah. So giving my feels all the time and space they need, being of service, and attending to my body in new ways. And it's fascinating, right? I, before all this, have been that gal who goes to the gym every day without question. And there are days I wake up and I'm like, all right, inner children, body, do you want to exercise? And my entire body is like, no, not today.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get to learn to listen in when my ego and my intuition are in friction, because my ego is like, go move, you need to move. And my
Right.
body's like, okay, hi, so we're in a pandemic in the worldwide hot zone, right? Like we're in New York City, May 2020. This is it. This is the epicenter.
Yeah.
So really listening into those cues, that's been so helpful for me. Yeah. What about you?
I love that. I mean, I think that it's so wonderful that this was an opportunity for you to kind of listen deeper and even more attentively to what you need, and also recognizing that those first few weeks needed a little bit of a shift and adaptation and flexibility. And I mean, everything you said resonates. I think that for me, really, I also noticed that shift. And for me, it really started with, I think that as healthcare professionals, but just as concerned citizens with multiple worries about uncertainty of our family members, friends, of people that don't have great access to care. I think it's easy to get into this loop of fear and worry. And one of the things that I was finding was really feeding that loop for me was watching the news.
Oh, yeah.
And really not having limits on how much each day or what I was consuming. And I just felt like I need to know it all. I need to be on the CDC website 24/7. And this is the only way that I can stay up to date. And it really was not serving me well. As you said, one of the things that I noticed right off the bat is that how is this draining the energy that I need for my family members, for my patients, to reorient, to be flexible. And so, so my transformation also came early on in realizing that what I was doing was just maladaptive. And, and I think it's going to be normal for all of us to recognize this for ourselves in many different habits that maybe we took on or we kept from pre-COVID. And then realizing that, this really isn't serving me well right now. But also recognizing, and something that you and I will get into, is that these mechanisms are there in place to protect us, and also being kind to ourselves when we're choosing to reject a certain pattern or choosing to accept a certain pattern, and saying, you know what, it's okay. You tried this and you thought that this would work and you thought that this would serve you. And this was a mechanism that your body has to protect you, to try and gain some certainty and a handle on what is going on. And no, it's not working. So let's create some boundaries around that and be okay with that, and not spend too much time beating ourselves up about it, or feeling, I think that there again, and also just feeling a lot of guilt around, not being right there on the front lines in the way that many of our colleagues are, and essential workers are. And so I think that processing these feelings and doing everything that I could to be of service to my patients, to my community, creating webinars with various healthcare professionals on different topics, COVID and non-COVID related, to really help us collectively through this time, to put our brains together, to put our minds together. And I think that definitely was a little bit of that personal switch for me. I think another thing that, that I shared with you as we were chatting about this webinar is I'm a mom of 2 kids. And so being okay with the fact that it's Zoom school time now, and as much as I know that our school is putting a great effort, and there are a lot of wonderful things coming out of it and a lot of great discoveries, it's just not the same as school. There's no social component in that same way. There are a lot of things, of course, that they're going to miss compared to that in-person experience. But now, does it help me to sit there and dwell on what could have been and where should have been? And, no, it doesn't. And so reorienting our goals and expectations for this time and exercising that flexibility, I would say for me has been really important. And then I would say movement and sleep, in terms of if I really had to pick 2 of the pillars of health that I absolutely must have, are movement and sleep.
Yeah.
And then everything else, of course, that we'll talk about. But I would say those are the 2 that I'm like, I gotta have those 2 each day.
Yes. Yeah. I, little known fact, have a PhD in sleeping, but now I'm bragging.
I love
But
that.
I
Tell us
noticed,
more.
I mean, thank you. I'm a real championship sleeper, always have been. And it was interesting in those first few days, I wasn't getting the sort of quality and depth of sleep that I have been so lucky in all these years to just have be my norm.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting. So I started melatonin, cortisol manager, ashwagandha, all those things in the recognition that while I, for the most part, haven't been feeling the perceived stress, we need to remember that there's 2 kinds of stress, right? There's the stress that we perceive as humans, and we'll get into polyvagal theory and we'll dive deep and nerdy like we do about those things. But there's also organism stress, organic stress, physiologic stress. And our poor, sweet adrenal glands, like you said, every time you turn on the news, it's like everything's ending.
Exactly. Yeah. And that fight or flight and that perpetual, storytelling in a way to capture your attention. And so I completely agree. Just recognizing what triggers you, why, and then how to manage that time, and thereby manage your adrenals and manage your sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm so with you on just turning like the big news media off right now.
Mm-hmm.
I've been listening to smaller outlets and things like the BBC, Al Jazeera, like organizations that often tend to have less of that like clickbait kind of energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's let's get to the facts and let's try to not get in the minutia of things. And and I find the same way. I know that information changes on a daily basis. Even when I'll write an article about COVID-19 testing, but I'll also be aware that I wrote something about a week ago. I'll be aware that I'm sure more testing companies have been, granted the EUA, the emergency use authorization, a week or 2 later. Or maybe a new test will be FDA approved by that time, and all of these. And so being mindful of those periodic check-ins with your trusted sources, but just knowing that I'm still safe, even if I'm not on these outlets 24/7. I'm going to be we're going to be okay, even if we're not tuned in 24/7 to social media, and to following what's currently going on with that 24/7 way.
Cycle. Yeah. I think what you're pointing to really illustrates a popular false cognition that when we flood ourselves, having information and worrying can be stand-ins for taking courageous action or massive action to actually change our lives, right? It can feel like taking in information is doing something, And that worrying about whatever you just read or heard is doing something that it is somehow in any way helpful, but it is really just keeping us so stuck, right?
Absolutely. And it's also in a way a distraction. You know, if we think about, and even pre-COVID-19, right? If we think about our own habits or what I'm sure we've both seen with many patients that we see, sometimes, and whether this is, you know, getting to our personal goals or professional goals, or if there is too much sort of resolved or unprocessed anxiety around it, one of the coping mechanisms is, let me distract myself with this thing over here. And
Yep.
sometimes that piece of information and that constant searching for something can be a way to replace what's actually happening, or dealing with it internally, or
Right.
taking the, you know, I love the cry it out hour,
Yes.
um, or you know, it could be a chanting hour or a mantra hour or a mindful hour, but all of those are things where we have to look inward, and
Right.
that can be really, really scary sometimes. And
Yeah.
so searching for that external information, or for anything really on the outside, as a way to distract ourselves from what really is.
Absolutely. In my work, I talk about it as buffering. And so the term comes from the 1970s, from the psychological research. And so it was originally used in this positive way, meaning the social buffer that's put around us when there is trauma or crisis or stress. So the example that's usually used is, there's a death, and after, you know, the funeral and all that, people bring food to the house, take in your garbage cans, right? Do those kind of things in a neighborhood to take care of you.
Mhm.
And those things are absolutely beautiful and so amazing, and do serve to give our psychology and our nervous system, and then our physiology as well, a break from the taxing overload of something like a loss. And so many of us have had so much loss in this period. And there reaches a point at which buffering can be the active pushing away, like you were just saying, of feelings. And it's both completely understandable, right? If your window of tolerance, meaning your physiologic nervous system based psychological capacity to deal with stress, is small. And
Mhm.
so when you're not sort of filling up your own cup with self-care, when there's trauma in your history, when you don't have the coping mechanisms you need, your window of tolerance for the challenges of life gets smaller and smaller. And then
Mhm.
you drop something like a pandemic in it, and it whoop, gets so small. And so of course we find ourselves drinking. I mean, how many memes on your Instagram are like, it's COVID wine time,
Exactly. Or the
right?
quarantini, or all, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. It's like a whole thing. So we drink or over exercise or don't exercise or overeat or undereat, right? We do
Mhm.
something, like you said, to push the feelings away, to
Mhm.
keep ourselves from getting overwhelmed. And I know we would both point to the work being, yes, to look at the buffers, and also to look at why your system's in overload,
Mhm.
right? Physiologically and psychologically, and to do so with love and gentleness and understanding, but to
Yeah.
do that work as you're able.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To really, um, as much as possible, and you know, we talk about this in the context of mindfulness and cultivating that awareness on
Right.
purpose, being able to take in, uh, with your senses, what is going on at the present moment, and be honest about it. But that doesn't
Yeah.
mean being judgmental. It doesn't
Right.
mean beating yourself up. But it's just sort of taking a little bit of that step back to see what things are really like.
Right.
And then starting to slowly, as we see, right, that's that first part of the um, solving any problem, or starting to make some adjustments or shifts, uh, then with that step back, we just have a more complete picture of where
Definitely.
things are. It's kind of like the different, I'm not sure where it came from, but the different saying about all these different individuals trying to describe an elephant,
Oh,
but
yeah.
each one is at the different part of the elephant. And so we all have these different perspectives of our own experiences, of other people's experiences. But if you just take a step back, you might actually be able to see that elephant in full and be able to appreciate the 360 of the situation, and then start to, as you said, kind of um, start to work on things with as you feel comfortable, and ideally with a coach, with a healthcare professional, but as you feel comfortable to kind of to sort of start to move with those insights that you're gaining.
Right. And one of the things that's really helpful for me that I teach all my patients and clients is to start by getting neutral about it. So if you find your brain repeatedly using a lot of adjectives and adverbs about a situation, right? Like, oh, he's such a jerk. Oh, she's the worst. Being stuck in this apartment's exhausting.
Mhm.
We start by getting neutral with it, which to me means seeing how that situation could feel if you were to choose, as a thought exercise, to take the adjectives off of it and to just see energetically what that does for you, right? To not call a situation the worst, right? This is just the situation.
Mhm.
Because when you're trapped in that thought loop, right? When you feel stuck in that thought loop of putting all these heavy adjectives and descriptors on things, it's like your vision's clouded, right? You can't see the reality of what is what. And we don't do this to negate our feelings or pretend that things aren't real. Like, never. Everything I teach is literally the opposite. It's always feel your feelings first, get in touch with your inner child who's feeling those feelings, right? Give them love.
Absolutely.
Right. Um, but you and I know in our healing world, in the spiritual world, there's so much emotional bypassing and so much like, just feel positive.
Mhm.
And I'm
Mhm.
just like, just so
Exactly.
not down with it,
No,
right?
no, no. Or even that, I'm curious to hear what you think about affirmations, because I think
Mm,
that at times we can use them in a certain way that feels genuine and that can be helpful. But I think that oftentimes it's so easy to misuse them, and they actually can often sound really phony
yeah,
and really like couldn't be farther from the truth. And then it's
right.
almost like you're mocking yourself. So I'm curious
Mm.
to hear your thoughts on that, and if you ever recommend that people use them.
What a great question. I love that. So, a lot of my work comes from positive psychology and cognitive behavioral theory. And so, in those two frameworks, it's always strengths based, which
Mhm.
means both recognizing what's awesome about the way you're currently thinking,
Mhm.
right? Like
Mhm.
how it's a protector, right? If you're thinking, I'm the worst, your body's probably
Mhm.
trying to protect you from something. And so,
Yep.
meeting that with, no, I'm the best.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's biophysiologic, it's lying to yourself. We don't
Mhm.
even need fancy terms, right? And
Right.
I just don't believe in BSing
Mhm.
anyone. I mean, you and I are not of a people, your people cut to the chase. I'm from Argentina, we're both
Yeah.
New Yorkers,
Serbia, New
right?
Yorkers. Yeah.
Serbia, Argentina, New York, we don't mess around.
No. No. No.
We're going to tell you how it is.
That is how I was raised. It's like, my parents would be like, why did you do this? Come on. Like there is no, or friends too, even like, just tell you how it is.
Right. So you and I are no BS women.
Mhm.
So why
Mhm.
would we BS ourselves,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? Or our inner children who are looking
Mhm.
to adult us to be their best parent.
Mhm.
And yes, I am not a parent, but I have spent many, many years with children, and there's some fibbing that has to happen,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
But
Right.
we don't lie, right? Like
No.
outright lie. That's not loving. And
Right.
so, why would you lie to your own inner child, right? And
Mhm.
so, I don't recommend affirmations. Instead, I teach my clients to look at the thoughts that are leading them to feel ways that don't serve them,
Mhm.
right? So, let's take a really simple example, working from home.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the circumstance. And so your thought may be, I don't know how to get started. I've never used Zoom. I don't know what this is. I'm freaking out. And so then you'll feel overwhelmed. The
Mm-hmm.
action you may take would be to procrastinate. And the result you create in your life is that you still feel overwhelmed. You don't know what to do. You miss the Zoom call, and then you're ruminating and spinning. So to take that circumstance and put some BS on it, like, I am so great at Zoom. I love working from
Right,
home,
right.
right? Your body's just like, you can
Yeah, I'm
figure
not
it
buying
out.
this, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are you doing? Don't lie to me. So it doesn't actually move you forward because we can't work with lies.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead I teach something called belief bridges. And so it's literally, well, it's not literally, it is very much figuratively building a belief across the little river, a bridge across the river of your beliefs to the goal. So if you're sitting here on this side and you're thinking there's no way I can do this, this is impossible, and where you want to get to is, yeah, working from home is totally fine. I don't need the IT guy. I figured this out. In between are your old thoughts, your habitual thoughts, what the Buddhists would call like your monkey mind, those thoughts that keep
Yes.
getting imprinted, right? Put into your
Mhm.
brain. And so we'd start here, just put down one plank. I
Mhm.
am practicing learning to hate working from home a little less today.
Mhm.
So you work on that thought till you believe it.
Mhm.
Then the next day, right? I am practicing on working on considering maybe liking this or maybe being okay with this. And
Mhm.
then you sort of creep towards believing it more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, until
Mhm.
one day you wake up and you're like, guess it isn't that bad.
Bad. And you get to that sort of neutral, to that
Right?
okay. You know, it's
Exactly.
so funny. It reminds me so much of a strategy that we used for my daughter. So I don't know if I
Oh,
mentioned this, and I hope this is helpful to people listening who may have experience with anxiety. But my daughter had an anxiety disorder called selective mutism, which
mm,
meant that she wasn't speaking in public places for a long time, and then it got limited to school. And so what we did is behavioral strategies with this psychologist who specializes in selective mutism is praise for very small steps. So it's kind of like what you were referencing as that bridge. She certainly wasn't going to go from being completely mute at school to all of a sudden, you know, chit-chatting in front of the entire class. But she maybe could go from mute to whispering in the hallway to someone. And then after that whisper in the hallway, maybe that whisper could get a little bit closer to the classroom door, and then a little bit inside the classroom, and then a whisper to the teacher inside the classroom, and then a tiny little voice. And so
so tender.
that positive reinforcement of
Yeah.
these little manageable steps. And I think that I really learned so much through her treatment of this, which thankfully she doesn't have anymore. But it so applies to everything in life, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's learning how to hate Zoom less or working from home less, whether it's learning to love ourselves, whether it's paving that way for ourselves personally, professionally, whether it's learning how to cope with COVID-19.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's just, I want to pause for how tender that story is.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely was a long road, but I mean, she was so brave to do that. And actually, that's what we use the term with her selective mutism, but we also refer to it as brave voice. You know, Olivia, you're using your brave voice. Great job. And I think that, by the way, actually, even for anybody listening who have, you know, maybe they don't have selective mutism, but they're afraid of speaking up, and they're afraid of one thing that I learned that actually even for myself, this is helpful because I oftentimes find, you know, am I okay speaking up? Are people going to think, you know, that, I don't know, whatever
Whatever.
judgments I
Yeah.
think of myself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things that I think can be really effective is if we just challenge ourselves with that little challenge and then give a little pat on the back of like, good job using your brave voice. You know, whether it's speaking up to your boss about something, whether it's speaking up to your partner about something, and just like, I use my brave voice. I was able to, and again, it goes back to that protective, that coping mechanism. Oh, Catherine said brave voice. I love that term. I know.
Oh,
I
thank
loved
you,
it too.
Catherine.
When
Yeah,
I
it's
heard it,
so,
I was
I'm
like,
like,
I'm so using this for Olivia, but we can, as adults, we often lose that brave voice when we're frightened, when we're anxious, when we're worried.
Mhm.
And so there's so many opportunities to practice it for all of us when we get into
Oh,
that state.
thank you for sharing that. It's
Yeah.
just it's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Really.
Well,
Yeah, brave voice.
yeah,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think actually might be a nice segue into polyvagal theory and
I
how
was
we use
literally
it,
just
right?
thinking that.
Um,
I love that.
yeah,
So, I'll just
wonderful.
dive in. All
Let us
right.
dive in.
Adjust your
Yeah.
safety glasses. Make sure your pocket protectors are properly in place, my nerds. Something I do on the Feminist Wellness podcast a lot is give nerd alerts.
I love it.
So, nerd alert. Polyvagal theory. So this is a theory that was first proposed by Dr. Stephen Porges, PhD. And so when we were in our medical training, I'm assuming you just learned the vagus nerve has two branches, right? So,
Exactly. Yeah.
exactly.
Polyvagal for me was after medical school, after residency that I came across
Right.
it. Mhm.
So we were trained to think that there was two branches to the vagus nerve, but we now understand it's different. So the vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve. The term vagus comes from the Latin to wander, and it's the longest nerve in our body. So it comes out through your head and down through the middle of the animal, and it innervates or gives nerve function to everything along its path. So it controls your facial expression, your hearing, smell, moving of your mouth and jaw, swallowing, heart, lungs, diaphragm, digestion, reproductive function. So pretty much
Pretty much
most of being,
everything.
pretty much all the things. Yeah, I think that's all the things. It even in a way controls the pause, right? Because it can make them sweat. So polyvagal theory gave us this beautiful understanding of what happens when human animals are and other mammals and reptiles, some reptiles, but when we'll just speak broadly, when we are under stress and trauma. So let me explain the nerve, how it functions, and then how it applies to your life and why it's important to know about it. So there's two main branches of this nerve. That's the sympathetic, which you may have heard of, which is fight or flight. And so you see with your eyes, smell with your nose, hear with your ears for signs of lions. And so the body is on this constant vigilance. Is there a lion? Is there a lion? Is there a lion? In codependency and perfectionism, this looks like, do you like me? Are you okay? Do you like me? Are you okay? Do you like me? Do you like me? Right? In that, am I enough? Am I okay? So sympathetic, ruled by adrenaline, norepinephrine, and eventually cortisol from our sweet little adrenal glands. That's fight or flight, and it prepares you to punch a lion in the jaw, run like heck if you're small like me. The other branch is the parasympathetic. And we now know, thanks to Stephen Porges' work, that that has two branches of its own. The first is ventral, which means the front body, and that is controlled through the face. And so, yes, we're looking for danger, but as humans, we are pack animals. We need each other so much, the way sweet Olivia needed you to support her with her brave voice. So tender. And so we're constantly listening to people's voices for something called prosody, which means, is it a nice tone? Does it sound like a nice person? And I'll make a little side note. I've been at births on 3 continents, and across all those continents, every new parent that I have met grabs their baby and goes, ooh, doo, 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 doo.
Mhm.
Right? Or some variation
Mhm.
thereof.
Mhm.
A sweet little like soothing kind of noise that actually physiologically calms the nervous system and puts us in ventral vagal. Isn't that tender?
It's amazing.
I
It
love
really
that.
is.
It's just an
Beautiful.
instinct. Parents just
Beautiful.
give birth and they just know that. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And so that's ventral vagal. That's safe and secure, social and connected. So the other part is the dorsal vagus. And so that's our back body. And this is the freeze response. And the way I remember it is when you're ventral, you're like this to the world. Hello, world. And then dorsal is when you're like this. And if you pay attention to your body, you can get some important clues and cues to your nervous system state based on your posture. So we'll lean forward when we're getting a little sympathetic. We'll lean back as we get dorsal, and we'll generally be sort of in this middle posture when we're ventral, when everything's okay.
Open. Mm-hmm.
We're open, right? And we can later link it to things like the heart chakra, right, which opens up in ventral vagal. And so this is really important when we're talking about big stressors like the pandemic, which may be touching on folks' trauma experience and can send you into that sympathetic place really easily. Like we were talking about, both of us in the news, right? It's like, oof, I'm getting a little sympathetic.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And what happens is, so again, as a human mammal, there's a stressor, there's something caught your attention that sounds dangerous, right? Let's say you think someone's going to mug you. The first thing most of us do, the first thing we do as mammals is to say, cool, dude. Like, it's okay. Here, take my wallet, take my keys. We're cool, right? We're good, right? Like, all good, right? Don't hurt me. Just take my stuff.
Yeah.
Right? We seek that social connection in moments of danger, trauma, stress. We're still asking, are we okay? Because that's what pack animals do. If that doesn't work, then we're going to take off or punch in the nose. And when that's exhausted, we'll collapse. And so what the dorsal vagus experience of immobilization looks like is depression, that like withdrawn, like, yeah, okay, we'll just do whatever you want. No, it's fine. You can pick the movie again. We'll just have whatever dinner you want. No, it's fine. It's fine. No, I'm fine. You know, that just kind of like, yeah. Yeah, just when you have tapped out of your capacity to like show up and be socially connected. And that's a challenging state. It's a challenging state to be in. Anxiety can live in dorsal, but it does tend to live more in sympathetic. And so what's normal and natural is to have an ebb and flow. It should look like a sine wave, if my nerds remember those from AP calculus, but right, so it should look like that beautiful little sine wave, because we need sympathetic activation to like put on pants and turn on a computer and right, like get up, get moving, do things.
Exactly. To have that drive.
Yeah. And dorsal can be very healthy. So sleep is a dorsal state. Shavasana in yoga or breathwork meditation is a dorsal state. And so it's natural and normal to ebb and flow between them. People can tend, I have seen, to sort of villainize anything other than ventral vagal, but we need it all. We just need it in its balance, right?
Balance, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think this is incredibly important always, but particularly now, because when we can name the state we're in, there's an empowerment that comes with that education and with being in touch with yourself. Right? In feeling your own feelings and being able to name what's going on internally. And if you can do it, if you're, have the support with your partner or folks in your community or friends, to name it out loud. So my partner and I will say like, oh, I'm getting a little irritable. I'm feeling getting a little sympathetic here, Tiger. I'm going to not be in a room with a human for a second, right? If I'm feeling it. Or I'll say the opposite, which is, I'm getting a little irritable. Can you hug me, but hard, right? Because sometimes that pressure, think of like mammals, right? They'll like sit on each other, or like how our cats and dogs will come and like throw themselves on us.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a way to get ventral vagal. Other great ways to move ourselves into ventral vagal are finding someone to smile with us. And yes, that can be over FaceTime or Zoom. If that's not available to you, really, and this sounds so cheesy, but whatever, I'm a total cheeseball, looking in the mirror and smiling at yourself. Because one of the ways that our physiology recognizes ventral vagal is with crow's feet. Isn't that so cool?
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, the body, it's part of why, babies with all their wrinkles and all their fat and older folks are seen as affable and like, oh, she's just a sweet old lady. And like, you don't know her.
Right.
All the wrinkles and all the like sincere, those lines that we read as sincerity. Versus a non-ventral vagal smile, which is
right.
Kind of puts you on edge, right?
The eyes aren't doing anything. Yeah.
Right. It gets my back up. There's a woman in my building who smiles like that. And I'm always like, oh, God, is she going to cut me? Like, what?
And now with masks, we can really only see each other's eyes if we're out. So,
no.
yeah.
Yeah, I've been definitely, when I walk around my neighborhood, like smiling as much as I
Mhm.
can and, hi, neighbor, hi, and giving that prosody of voice because we need that connection.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
even when we think about just some of the basics of like oxytocin, like the
Yes.
love hormone and those hugs and those, and I
Yes.
think, I think about people that are in, shelter in place alone and not having that physical touch. But one of the things I recommend to patients, and that I do this for my kids, but people can do it on their own. I'll give them like a massage before
Yeah.
bedtime oftentimes, but even doing a self massage. In Ayurveda, we call it abhyanga, which is a self massage with some oils to just like stimulate and show that self love and appreciation and that touch, because we still
Yeah.
do respond to touch.
Yes, very deeply. You have some lucky kiddos.
I
They're lucky to have
know.
you.
I wish I had like a foot massage every night before bedtime, but yeah, that's a
Yeah,
whole other story.
right. You can give yourself one.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Oh, sorry. Go on.
oh no, I just was gonna say I love that recommendation to give ourselves touch. A lot of my patients and clients are in isolation alone, and it can be really challenging, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Absolutely. We're social beings. And so this is profoundly affecting us. And we have to find ways in which we can compensate for the time being
right,
and get as close as possible to what would naturally occur.
right.
Um, and I think that to tie into I love your explanation, by the way, of the polyvagal theory, um, but also of that balance. And if we're really not in that balance, and if we're spending too much time in the sympathetic, for example,
Right.
we know oftentimes from, let's say, um, if you're working 100 hours a week, you're constantly in that sympathetic fight or flight, and then you reach burnout,
Yes.
and then you find that, okay, I'm tired all the time no matter how much sleep I get. I'm experiencing aches and pains, I'm depressed, like all of that is kind of going from that predominantly sympathetic state into that, essentially into that dorsal vagal that's
Yeah.
kind of trying to say, okay, you really have to slow down, this is burnout time. And so one of the things that I often share with people, if they really feel that they're at that level of just total overwhelm, and they, for whatever reason, didn't act on it earlier, um, one of the things to keep in mind is that, and we look at it as these concentric circles, and this was first presented to me in a mindfulness based stress reduction class, which we'll talk a little bit about mindfulness based stress reduction and how we can really use that as a tool in our toolbox to get us into that greater balance and to really help us leverage that dorsal vagal state. But these concentric circles, if you think about the innermost circle, that's the circle of comfort. And then you've got one circle outside it, that's the circle of challenge. We're thriving, we're pushing boundaries, we're achieving, we're social, it's all happening. And then we've got that outer circle of, we're burnt out, we're overwhelmed, there's too much responsibility, too much uncertainty, too much fear. And we just don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with that pressure at that time. So we may be losing sleep over it. We may be fatigued. We may be, all of those symptoms that I listed. Our digestion might be messed up.
Right.
Getting the aches and pains and these unexplained symptoms, which we both have seen in people time and time again as a result of what's going on with us mental health wise.
Right.
And so recognizing that when we hit that burnout stage, it's not like we can just go back to the challenging and just like take it down a notch. We got to go all the way back to that comfort zone and really use the nourishing practices of that comfort zone to build our way back up to challenge. We can't just say, okay, I'm burnt out, I'll only go to 60 hours a week instead of 100 hours a week of work, or I'll up my sleep a little bit. And no, that's a red flag where
Right.
our body is telling us you got to go back to comfort, which
Right.
also means ask for help.
Yes.
Family, friends,
Right.
healthcare professional. Start to change your routine and make some not long-term changes necessarily, but changes for the time being to really support and nourish your well-being, from sleep to nutrition to movement to working with someone who can help and kind of help you identify all of those different factors that may be impacting your health. And then as you're supporting yourself, as you start to kind of build yourself up and gain that resilience and energy and balance in the ventral vagal, sympathetic, dorsal vagal, then you go out there and thrive again and reach all of those things. But it's kind of like this dance where we have to recognize and honor each stage that we're in.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And important to add is the understanding that everything you were talking about, optimized digestion, thyroid function, reduced inflammation, therefore less aches and pains, reproductive function, all these things happen in ventral vagal. And they happen in the interior of those concentric circles like you were talking about, right? Maybe in challenge as well, if it's a healthy challenge, right? One that feels aligned for your nervous system. When you are in fight or flight, or you are collapsed against the back of a cave wall, thinking there's like a saber-toothed tiger coming to eat you, I have a question. Are you going to stop to digest a cheeseburger? Right? Like, are you kidding me? Am I going to make healthy thyroid hormone? No, you're bananas. Am I going to make oxytocin, which is the love hormone, dopamine, which makes you feel great and joyful, right? I'm not going to make these chemicals. Serotonin, get out of here. Melatonin, which gives you healthy sleep? Psst, no way. No way. That would be a ridiculous use of biology. Your body's simply not going to do it, right?
Energy, it's prioritizing, it knows better than you, and it's saying we need to get out of here or fight.
Exactly. So if you're having digestive problems, look at the stress in your life. If your thyroid's not doing what you wish it would, look at the stress in your life. Ask yourself which of those 3 circles you so beautifully described you're finding yourself in. If your mental health is struggling. These are important questions to ask.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So shall we chat a little bit about mindfulness?
I wish you would.
So, I'd like to start by actually maybe even doing a little bit of an exercise to get us centered. And actually, we're going to do a breathing exercise just because this is one that I absolutely, of so many different things you could do. This is one that I absolutely use as my first go-to. I teach it to all my patients, and it's something that you literally could start doing tonight after we do it here. So it's the 4-7-8 breath that I first learned about through Dr. Andrew Weil, who, as you may know, is the pioneer of integrative medicine. And it basically uses your inhalation and exhalation ratio, and really that prolonged exhalation, to activate that vagus nerve, to activate that relaxation. And so what we'll do, I will demo the first breath, and then we can all do 4 breath cycles together. And normally I recommend doing 4 breath cycles twice a day, or at a time of total stress, or that red flag, or that email that you get that you're like, okay, I need my breathing before I read this. So this is how we're going to do it. I'm going to just show with my fingers what I'm doing, what I'm counting in my head. And then I'll mimic it. And just remember, when we exhale, we're going to keep our tongue behind our front upper teeth, and you'll hear me make a whooshing sound. So this is what it looks like. I'll start on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
So it was in, hold, long, out, right?
Exactly. So in for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. Exactly. And if you, for some reason, if you don't feel comfortable holding it for as long as I did, or you can adjust your own count, just maintain the same ratios, but you can count at your own pace. The 4 of inhale, the 7, and then the 8. So
Beautiful.
let's do 4 all together. 1, 2, 3.
Hold. Out.
And our second breath.
In. Hold. Out. That was beautiful. Again, lucky us. Hold. Out.
Let's do our final one.
In. Hold. Out.
All right. How does everybody feel? How do you feel?
Oh, but somewhere between ventral and the happy dorsal.
I love it. Nice.
Yeah, it's nice and calm. That's
Right?
beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of my favorites.
It really, I think it's such a remarkable exercise because every time that I do it in a presentation setting, and of course now we're on a webinar, we don't necessarily see all the beautiful faces watching us and all of the reactions, but every time that I have an opportunity to do this live, it's just the energy of the room shifts, and there's just a little more bliss and a little bit more of that calm. And I also find that I often go from my sympathetic, like, I gotta, do and perform, to more of a, like, okay, we're here. Um, so I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I'm happy to put a link as well, or send you out the link of how to do this exercise. But generally 4 breaths at a time, in the morning and in the evening, and then at any time of stress. And this has helped many of my patients reduce their panic attacks, reduce even their use of medications such as Xanax or Ativan for panic. So it really is very, very powerful. But so the reason that I started with this breath, as we were starting to talk about mindfulness, is just to remind us about what that awareness and that being in the present moment is, right? Because oftentimes, as we're doing things, right, we forget that we're a human being, and we're so consumed with doing. And we have to-do lists. We have our calendar, which is a calendar of actions. It's not a calendar of how to be. And it's like, oh, I have this meeting from this time to that time, but it's not, I'm going to be receptive and welcoming and compassionate. It's a to-do list.
Right.
And so I find that with breathing, it's the easiest way to kind of bring that point home of, I'm just here right now, because I have to count. I have to do the 4, the 7, the 8. I have to be in my body. I have to recognize how I'm feeling. Am I getting a little lightheaded from this breathing exercise? Am I getting a little impatient? Am I getting blissed out? What's going on? Is my heart rate changing? Like, all of these things all of a sudden can, and maybe not all of them, but maybe one of them comes into our awareness because we're just simply focusing on that breath.
Beautiful.
And so really what, thank you. So really what this definition of mindfulness is, and I use John Kabat-Zinn's definition, who is the founder of mindfulness-based stress reduction, is essentially this being in the present moment and being fully aware on purpose, right? So we're purposely aware and sensing things and taking this input from our environment, but without judgment, which is a little bit of a paradox, and we can put that on the side and we'll address it. But essentially, without judgment means not that we're going to stop all the natural judging that goes on in our heads. and all the 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day that come across our minds, but really that we're just going to take a little bit of a distance from it. We'll be aware of the judgments and the thoughts, but we're going to say, okay, I'm here and I'm aware, and this isn't me. My judgment is not me. My thought is not me. I'm the awareness of it. I'm observing this.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of that starting point of how I generally think of mindfulness and how I started understanding it. And really what's beautiful about it is that it can be practiced in so many different ways. And it doesn't have to be the conventional, sure, it can be the conventional sitting meditation. And that has, and we unfortunately don't have time to go into the numerous studies of looking at mindfulness-based stress reduction for chronic pain, for irritable bowel syndrome, for people with heart disease, improving quality of life, improving eating patterns, improving sleep, depression, anxiety. There are many, many different studies outlining the specific protocols and benefits from it. But the beauty of it is that one can do a walking meditation. One can mindfully brush their teeth.
Yep.
One can mindfully just walk back and forth in their room just to get a sense of what it's like to really be fully present in this moment in our body. And so although this is a very, very brief info, I'm happy to send some more, or intro, I should say, I'm happy to send more information on it. But the reason that we wanted to bring it up today is really as a tool that we can universally use. It's accessible to all of us. There are many amazing online resources for it. But we can do this to start changing some of those relationships between, as you talk about, Victoria, our thoughts and our feelings and our actions and that story that's going on and our experience of this pandemic. We can start using mindfulness today. We can start using intentional breathing today to start to allow for some space for those thoughts and the stories that we tell ourselves to start shifting.
I love that. I love that. Some of the tips that I would share for folks to remember to do this is ye old Post-it notes. So behind this camera, there's many a Post-it note that says, keep it simple. Self-love wins the day. Breathe, right?
I love it. Yes.
Yeah. Setting an alarm on your phone. So I have one that goes off every hour. It's just a gentle chime. And a little message appears on my phone that says, breathe in self-love every hour. And I just, that long exhalation, you blow off the CO2, like you were just teaching, gets you ventral vagal when you expand your belly. Beautiful. Yeah. And what I often hear, and I'm sure you hear this too, is, these techniques are great, but I forget to do them. So don't forget to do that. Set reminders, right? Use your Post-it notes or a piece of scrap paper you tape to the fridge or whatever it is. But remind yourself of the power you have within you to calm your physiology, to get mindful, like you were just saying. I love those tips, like walking around your bedroom. Also the reclining Buddha. I'm sure you've seen reclining Buddhas.
The reclining Buddha. Tell me what that is.
Oh my gosh. So I often hear from folks, I'd love to meditate, but I sit all cross-legged in lotus or half lotus or full lotus, and then my legs hurt, and then my foot falls asleep, and then my back hurts, and then I don't want to do meditations. And so I remind folks of walking meditation, which you shared, or the reclining Buddha. So there are many, 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 you can Google this when we're done, statues of the Buddha lying down. And it's just a reminder, you can meditate anywhere, anytime. You don't have to be in an ashram or on a mountaintop, right? Zen Buddhism, like you were saying, Zen meditation is about being present with what is, right?
Yes, exactly. And it's funny, in one of my meditation communities, we often talk about the crisis meditators. And I certainly fall into this pattern at times, because I will say there are times that I'm very consistent with my meditation, and then there are times that aren't. and then a crisis happens. And then I'm like, okay, crisis meditate, crisis meditate. So ideally, you want to avoid that crisis and you want to not be a crisis meditator, but if it happens, it happens. You know, it's never too late. It's never too early. It really is just about, you know, doing what we can to keep ourselves accountable, right? So if it means putting it on a post-it or putting it on a calendar, but also if we miss 2 weeks of it, getting back into it again with compassion, with that loving kindness.
Yeah. I love that, crisis meditator. Yeah. You're just one breath away from peacefulness, right? For just that one moment.
Exactly. Yeah. And then of course, you know, then in terms of activating our vagus nerve, in terms of getting into that rest and digest, getting into that ventral vagal mode and really supporting our digestive system, supporting our heart rate variability, which we did not get into, which is like a whole other topic, but supporting our heart rate variability, which is a marker of good health, supporting our gut bacteria. I mean, so many different things are influenced by how we perceive stress, by trauma, by these external factors, and how we deal with them.
Yeah. I love it is 7:00. We should let the people go. I am sharing both of our Instagrams here. So make sure to follow us. I got yours right? No, it's
DR _
Bojana. What a silly goose I am, folks. There we go. Put the underscore in the wrong place. But follow us on the Instagrams. We're going to be doing a lot more fun stuff for free for y'all to support you through this process. Going live, more webinars. I share a lot of breathwork meditation. You share all sorts of mindfulness tips. Don't be a stranger. I'd love it if you took a listen to the Feminist Wellness podcast. Is there anywhere on your site you'd like to direct people? Any downloads?
Absolutely. Yes, you can go to my website at drbojana.com. It's drbojana.com. And you can actually grab your own free meditation guide. And after you do that, you'll also be getting some tips from me when it comes to how to reduce stress, how to thrive, how to cope during this time, as well as some general health and wellness tips where we cover different areas from your thyroid to your digestive system, to healthy nutrition to recipes and much more.
So exciting. Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. Everyone who tuned in. Catherine says, thank you for a beautiful hour. Take care and stay well, everyone. Thank you, Catherine. I'm so glad you're here. Take good care of you as well. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your evening with us. It feels like such a beautiful gift. So thank you. Thanks,
everyone. Thank you so much, Victoria. It was such a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. All right, be well. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.